Bridgerton is something a bit like if Jane Austen met Gossip Girl and maybe like, 45 Shades of Grey. And so we have a lot of fun in period costume. It's set in the Regency period in 1813. It is a romance and a fantasy, and it is a big, warm Regency hug that we're delivering to you just for Christmas. It's that.
I mean, it was central to the early conversations about what this project was going to be. When I was talking to Shonda about the project, talking to Chris, it was about being able to break out of what people consider to be traditional period drama orthodoxies, which don't necessarily exist for any particularly good reason. It's a romance fantasy about rich, attractive, admirable people. Black folks have been rich, attractive, and admirable in the past, in the present, they will be in the future. There is zero reason not to showcase that in our stories. And so we made sure that we did.
Simon is a tall, dark, mysterious, shadowy, charming, thoroughly broken, problematic man, and comes with all of the attraction and repulsion that comes along with that. He's this great, glamorous shadow that needs to find himself and learn how to love and be loved. I think we're at a point where people are ready to see new versions of the world they thought they knew in all kinds of ways. I think the social conversation in the world has reached a point where people are like, the world we thought we knew is incomplete. And there are new perspectives to all the stories that we have been remaking. And also, we spent the last few years doing a lot of remakes. Like, this is kind of the industry joke, right? It's like another remake or another sequel or another old IP being resurrected. And I think that we're at a point where we are very, very hungry for new versions of stories and for reinvented versions of stories and new perspectives on things, rather than necessarily just a comfortable pair of shoes to slip into. We kind of want both. We want it all. Yes, absolutely. We worked with a wonderful intimacy team headed by Lizzie Talbot, and it frees up the work of your actors so much to have someone direct and guide you and protect you and look after you. It's a little bit nuts that people ever did this without one. It's, not impossible. You still have lots of good-natured people trying to look out for each other. But it's like getting on stage and swinging a sword around and going, we'll be fine, we'll work it out. I'll try not to hit you. You don't want to be hit, do you? Good, neither do I. We'll try not to. As opposed to having someone who knows what they're doing with a sword saying, here's how you don't hit each other, but make it look like a real fight. And it's very, very similar. It's choreography. And once you have your choreography down, you get to concentrate on doing your actual acting work, which is a gift to your actors.
I think we always knew that we had a large audience to play to. The books were bestsellers before we even touched them. The fans are incredibly passionate, so we kind of got a little taste of that from the beginning and had a relationship with that audience. And so I think it's lovely to have that preparation, and then as more and more people join that train that was already moving, it's lovely to be able to welcome people into that and just have more and more people excited about this thing that we all worked so hard to make for them. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to include people in our storytelling in the 21st century. I think we have a very long and sad tradition of excluding people from stories, excluding people from history, literally painting people out of historical pictures and documents. And so it's the very least we can do to start painting people back in. I think if we're going to have a great, big, fun Cinderella fantasy for Christmas, that the more people who can play, that more people who are invited to participate in that and see themselves as glamorous and worthy of love and status, the better. And so that's all what we're doing, which feels great. No, he wants absolutely no part of it. He thinks, like a lot of men, that he is self-sufficient and that his strength comes from his isolation and his pride. And I think that a lot of his character arc is disabusing him of those notions, that strength can come from vulnerability. Strength can come from releasing your pride in the vendetta against your own dead father. Strength can come from being someone who can love and be loved, and you can be stronger than you think you are through just isolation and dominance if you allow those softnesses to come in, if you allow those generosities to be part of your arsenal of what makes you a strong man. And I think Simon learning those lessons is the most appealing thing about him to me. I mean, I think you realize when you get a lot of positive feedback from the fans. I think we have a very kind of immediate feedback loop in terms of social media, and it's lovely to see people reacting positively to a thing that you've made. We always knew that there was a fan base for this beginning coming in because the books were bestsellers. So there was always that interaction and that relationship with the fans, and it's fun to kind of expand that and just inhabit that on a wider scale. So it's very gratifying. A lot of warnings, like the family WhatsApp group has a lot of, you know, flashing red light emojis, but also like, my family's seen it all before, they raised me. Yeah, I mean, I've been working with these guys for a while, so there's lots of people that I know and love and admire the work of in the company. So it was a bit of a no-brainer to stick around when they said, hey, we got this thing that we're working on that we'd love you to read. And I had a look at it, and we had a bunch of meetings, and we talked about all the opportunities that there were to do something new in this time period, to do something people don't expect in what's otherwise known as quite a traditional genre, and bring all of that 21st century Shondaland flavor to it, bring all of that color, bring all of that excitement, that speed, wit, sexiness, fun. And so it was a very easy decision to make. We were very lucky to have inherited characters that people already love. Like, thousands of people are so into these books all over the world. And so the chemistry already existed. It was on the page. I think that these two people are very lucky to find someone else who is as witty and sparky. I think they're both the types of people who are used to being the smartest person in the room. And the second they find someone who is up to the challenge of kind of really sparring with them on an intellectual level, is hugely enticing, and so they get a bit of a braingasm over each other. Favorite song that we danced to? There were a couple. There's a British artist called Plan B who had a song called Writing on the Wall that we danced to all the time. We danced to Stormzy a lot. I think Rainfall we used a lot. So like, I don't know, we mixed it up. We had a bit of a kind of jukebox in the rehearsal room, and we tried different energies for each dance to find different things. I think you said a mouthful. The early conversations about this piece were exactly centering on that. It was about finding new ways of approaching period dramas that people hadn't done before. If you say this period dramas people, they expect a certain set of orthodoxies, and it's very traditional and very bound in certain boundaries. And most of them don't need to be there. So we threw a lot of it out, and we were saying, well, what do we want to do? How can we make this more fun? How can we bring in 21st century conversations that are relevant to our audience, and bring in the hundreds of years of feminist conversation that we've had since this, bring in the conversations about what masculinity means in the 21st century. The thing that excited me personally was examining this archetype of Simon is fairly typical. He's a tall, dark, mysterious, brooding, wounded man. And I wanted to interrogate what is actually attractive about that. What are the redeeming qualities there? Why is that a romantic archetype? What's his journey? And so often I see him as the antagonist in this story. He needs to be defeated to be built back up, to find out that there is strength in vulnerability. There is strength in being able to find honesty with someone that you are intimate with. There is strength in learning to love and be someone worth loving. And so bringing all of that into something that people think is familiar, but surprising and delighting people at every turn, with everything that we can bring to dramas in this period, was kind of what I was in it for. Again, I don't think happily ever after happens that early. I think that they get married very young, and love doesn't suddenly get simple just because you get married. If you talk to your parents, it's like, hey, you got married and then you stopped being interesting people and nothing ever happened to you again. Life got easy, right? I don't think that's quite how it plays out. And so I think that they'll learn that love is a living, breathing thing that you got to feed, you got to tend, you got to water, you got to let it rest. I think there's infinite places we can go with that. And we have such a rich world to work within. That I look forward to being delighted and surprised by what directions they choose to explore. I feel pressure from society every day. I'm on camera in the media as we speak. It's terrifying. But you kind of back yourself up and decide who it is that you want to be, what you want to represent to the world. What good can you do today, and how can you contribute that to the people around you? And I think those are the questions that our characters learn to ask themselves. Like, what have I actually got to contribute to people outside myself? That's kind of the core of what a love story is. How can I be better to this other person and stop letting all of my own stuff keep getting in the way?
Well, I think traditionally that period dramas are very feminist. I mean, we're talking that in the tradition of Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, Mary Shelley, at the times when they were writing these things like Pride and Prejudice, this was women stepping to the forefront of literature in a way that they hadn't before. So that was a feminist revolution. 200 years later and 4 or 5 waves of feminism later, I think it's only right that we keep bringing that perspective in and keep these stories revolutionary. And so I think it's a lot about that, about bringing in the female gaze, about having empowered female leads in the shows, and about re-looking at what's attractive about the masculine leads, like the guy that I play. I think the conversations we're having about what masculinity is and what's attractive about that come into this as well. So there's loads and loads of fun little things just kind of seeped into your usual kind of fun Christmas drama. Very relieving. I mean, I'd worked with Shonda for a couple of years now. I was a company man. I'd worked on a show called For the People, and I was very, very lucky that as we were announcing we were finishing up on that, I got the call where they were just like, hey, don't go anywhere too quick. We're working on this other thing. It's British. We've been talking about you for ages, and suddenly you're available. So we had a conversation. We talked about all the kind of big open field we had to run into with a very traditional genre and how we could bring that shondaland 21st century perspective to it. And do lots of kind of new and exciting things that no one expects, and just kind of have more fun than we'd had before in this genre. So it's great. It feels like coming home working in Shondaland.
I think it's a very heady combination of the familiar and the new. It's the period dramas that you know and love, but it's faster, wittier, funnier, certainly a little bit sexier. It's more glamorous. It's unapologetic of its own joy and indulgence, and I think we're missing all of that right now. We want to go somewhere where we can be happy and indulgent and glamorous. We want to go somewhere where we can have these dreamy, overblown romances, because we don't have a lot of intimacy in our lives right now because we're all on lockdown. And so I think that being able to provide a place for people to go to enjoy those things at the moment is something that is a real privilege. And so I'm glad that we can do that. Yeah, no, these are some of the first and most refreshingly intricate conversations I had in the whole project. I remember coming straight off the plane into a wardrobe fitting, and we were talking about everything from silhouettes to shapes to fabrics, but also just the basic character stuff. Like, who is this guy? He is coming from the outside world. He's been traveling in the East. He's bringing in new fabrics. He's bringing in fabrics that aren't traditional British prints, because he's been off in like Greece and kind of Mesopotamia and all of these other places. He's a Byronic archetype. So we looked at Byron's collars. We looked at what kind of jewels you wear. We look at what kind of keepsakes he might have on his person, about how he might wear the same clothes differently to everyone else. And so he ties his stocks in different ways. His footwear is often different to everyone else in the room. There is this element of outsider that we wanted to flirt with and kind of weave in and out of, which is not unfamiliar to me. And so it was fun to be able to have those conversations and say, what helps me do this job to the fullest of my ability and do this character and everyone that he represents justice. I think we were incredibly lucky with the chemistry on these characters. Julia Quinn had created a whole bunch of chemistry in whatever brilliant secret lab that she has. And then Chris had come in and again, kind of processed all of that in his writing. And so we had these characters that already had this connection, and we just kind of had to let that through. And then on top of that, we were immensely well prepared. We had etiquette lessons, dance lessons, writing lessons, essentially a lot of time in each other's arms before we even hit the set. And so once you've spent that many hours on the dance floor with someone, being close to someone, literally catching each other when you fall, and we did fall because we weren't brilliant dancers to begin with, then a lot of it happens quite organically. From Simon's perspective, that's a very different show. This is a show. The show is about finding strength and the sense and your own sense of identity in a society that expects certain things of you, that is restrictive in various ways, freeing yourself from those boundaries and finding a truer, larger, stronger version of yourself through love. I would describe Simon as tall, dark, mysterious, handsome, and thoroughly broken and wounded. I think that he is in denial about that fact. And I think that he's on a journey of self-discovery, and he only is able to do that through the help of the strong women around him, which he's unaware of at the beginning of the series.
I mean, I'm not big on boxing things into genre. I think most things are romances to various degrees. It's all about kind of how far along the dial you dial that in. And so kind of the answer would be yes, I assume I have, but also I don't think I've read anything that is within the kind of romance scene box, you know? So it's my favorite thing about this job is new things and new experiences. And this is a genre that has been very, very fun to play around in.
It's a thing that I'm sure you and I both read on the internet. Of the things that you can read on the internet about yourself, that's one of the more pleasant ones. So I'm glad of that.